My pilot son whispered. That's impossible. She's flying with me right now. The morning began the way most mornings did in my house, with a soft clatter of plates, the hum of the refrigerator, and the quiet feeling that life was moving along its usual track. I'd risen early, as I always did, and made breakfast for my son's family the way I had done since my husband passed, and the house grew bigger and lonelier without him. I told myself that being needed was a blessing. It kept my hands busy and my heart from wandering into places it didn't like to go. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. My name is Marilyn Hart, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived in the same modest neighborhood for nearly 3 decades, long enough to know which porch lights flicker at night and which dogs bark when a car door closes. It's not a wealthy place, but it's steady, and I've always believed steady was worth more than shiny. My older son, Daniel, lives with me along with his wife Elena and their little boy, Noah, who is 7 and thinks the world is a puzzle made for him to solve. Daniel leaves early every day for his job at an engineering firm, always in a hurry, always promising to be home in time to read Noah a bedtime story, always looking tired in a way he tries to hide behind smiles. I used to worry about him when he was a boy, about scraped knees and bruised pride. Now I worried about the heavier injuries, the ones you can't bandage. Elena had always felt like the best thing that could have happened to Daniel. She was pretty without seeming to try, organized in a way that made the house run smoothly, and polite enough to make neighbors praise her after short conversations. She called me Mom from the first week of her marriage, and I'll admit, it warmed me. After losing my husband, after watching my boys grow into men who didn't need their mother the way they once did, being called Mom again felt like a door reopening. That morning, Daniel had left while I was still pouring coffee. Elena, hair pinned loosely, stood by the stairs with a towel in her hands and said in her gentle voice, "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower before I run a few errands." "Go ahead, honey," I told her, smiling, because it all felt normal. The water started upstairs, a soft rush through pipes that had been in this house longer than Elena had been in my life. Noah had already gone to school. He'd hopped onto the bus with his backpack bouncing and waved at me like I was his whole world. I waved back until the bus turned the corner. I was rinsing the last breakfast plate when the landline rang. We still had one, partly because I was old-fashioned, partly because Daniel insisted it was useful if cell service went out, and partly because something about the sound of that phone, its sharp, familiar ring, made me feel anchored. I dried my hands on my apron and hurried to answer. "Hello, Mom." My younger son's voice burst through the receiver like sunlight. "It's me. I caught a break." My younger son is Ethan. He's a pilot, first officer on international routes, and he lives in airports and time zones more than he lives in any one city. When he was a boy, he used to lie on the grass and track planes with his finger as if he could pull them down like kites. He worked for that dream with a stubbornness that made me proud and scared at the same time. Hearing him always made the house feel less quiet, less heavy with routine. "Ethan," I said, leaning against the counter. "How are you? Where are you now?" "Layover," he answered. "Big airport. Too much coffee. Too many announcements. I figured I'd call you while I had a few minutes." We chatted like we usually did, his flight schedule, my garden, Noah's latest obsession, this week it was dinosaurs and how to draw them, Daniel's work. Ethan laughed, and I could picture him in his uniform, hair neatly combed, that same boyish grin he used to flash when he wanted to get away with something. Then his laughter faded into a pause that felt like the sudden drop of a plane into turbulence. "Mom," he said carefully, "something weird is happening." My fingers tightened around the receiver. "Weird how?" He lowered his voice, as if someone nearby could hear him and he didn't want them to. "Is Elena at the house right now?" The question seemed simple, and my answer came easily because I had no reason to doubt it. I glanced toward the stairs, where the steady sound of the shower still ran. "Yes, honey. She's upstairs. Showering." There was silence on the line, so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard his breath, shallow and controlled, the way it gets when you're trying not to panic. "That's impossible," Ethan said. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Of course she's here. Mom, he whispered, the words stretched thin with disbelief. I'm holding her passport in my hands. My stomach tightened like a fist. Her passport. I echoed, and my voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded smaller, uncertain. Yes, Ethan said, and I could hear movement behind him. Airport noise, a distant announcement muffled by the phone. I found it near the boarding gate. I opened it to check the name so I could turn it in. Mom, it's her. Elena Hart. Photo matches. Everything. My mind refused to build the bridge between his words and reality. I tried to step around it, like a person walking around a puddle instead of admitting the sidewalk is flooded. You must have found someone else's, I said quickly. Maybe a similar name. Or you're mistaken about the photo. I wasn't sure at first either, he replied, and now his tone had sharpened into something harder. So I went back into the cabin. I looked. My mouth went dry. Looked at what? At her, he said. Mom, she's on my flight. She boarded a few minutes ago. A cold wave rolled through my chest. I stared at the tiled floor like it might rearrange itself into an explanation. That can't be, I insisted, even as my voice shook. I spoke to her less than 10 minutes ago. She said she was taking a shower. Another pause. Heavier than the first. She's here, Ethan repeated, slower now, like he was laying bricks for a truth he didn't want to build. She's sitting in the front cabin, first class, next to a man who looks like he's wearing money. They're talking close. Comfortable. My heart began to pound so loudly I swore I could hear it in my ears. A man. I whispered. Yeah, Ethan said. Like they know each other well. I opened my mouth to speak, to argue, to demand proof. Anything. But before I could, the water upstairs stopped. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet shift in sound. But in that moment it felt like someone had turned off the only thing holding the world steady. A door opened upstairs. Soft footsteps crossed the landing. Then Elena's voice drifted down, light and familiar. Mom. Who's on the phone? My blood turned to ice. I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles ached. I forced my voice into something steady, something normal. Just a friend, honey. I could hear her moving toward the stairs. I stepped away from the kitchen doorway, my eyes fixed on the space where she might appear, where her face might confirm what my brain still refused to accept. Into the phone, I whispered. Ethan, I'm telling you she's here. I can hear her. He sounded frantic now. Mom, no. She's here. I'm looking at her right now. For a moment, it felt like the world had split into two versions and I was standing with one foot in each, unable to choose which was real. My hands trembled. I imagined Ethan's face. Serious, pale, eyes scanning the cabin. Ethan didn't lie. He never had. If anything, he was too honest for his own good. But Elena's voice was behind me, and voices didn't lie either. I ended the call without meaning to. My finger slipped, or maybe my mind simply couldn't hold both realities at once. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed in my ear like a warning. I set the receiver down with care, as if any sudden movement might shatter the house. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, towel wrapped around her hair, face fresh and calm. She looked like herself, the woman who packed Noah's lunches into neat little compartments, who folded towels into perfect rectangles, who always remembered birthdays. Who was it? She asked, smiling gently. I swallowed. Wrong number, I lied. She laughed softly as if that was the most normal thing in the world. People still call wrong numbers. I tried to laugh with her. The sound came out thin. She disappeared into the bedroom and came back downstairs minutes later in a pale blue dress, hair damp and combed smooth, as if nothing strange had happened. She moved through the kitchen like she owned the place in the way a daughter-in-law often does after enough years, opening cabinets without looking, checking the fridge as if she knew exactly what would be inside. I'm going to run to the market early, she said. Do you need anything? My throat felt tight. I stared at her hands, at the way she held her purse strap, at the casual grace of her movements, searching for anything that proved she was real. "Tomatoes," I said finally. "And maybe some cilantro." "Got it," Elena said with a bright nod. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, the quick affectionate peck she always gave me when she was in a good mood. Her skin was warm. Real. Then she left. I stood at the window and watched her walk down the driveway, her figure shrinking toward the street. A breeze lifted the hem of her dress. She waved at a neighbor. She turned the corner and vanished. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. When I exhaled, it felt like my lungs had been filled with stones. I sank onto the couch, hands clasped so tightly my fingers hurt. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the comfortable quiet of routine. It was the quiet of a room after someone has said something unforgivable. I replayed Ethan's words in my mind. Passport. First class. France. France. Elena didn't travel. Not without Daniel. Not without telling me. She complained about long car rides. She said airports made her anxious. She hated leaving Noah for more than a night. Her whole identity was wrapped around being the perfect mother, the perfect wife. So why would she be on a plane to another country? And if she was, then who had been in my house? A laugh tried to bubble up, not from humor but from sheer disbelief. It died in my throat. I told myself there had to be a mistake. Ethan could have misread the name. Maybe the woman on the plane looked like Elena but wasn't. Maybe the passport was stolen. Maybe it was a coincidence. But deep down, something older than logic stirred awake in me. A sense that life was shifting under my feet, and that I'd been ignoring cracks for a long time because I didn't want to see the foundation breaking. Noah came home from school that afternoon, bursting through the door with his backpack thumping against his shoulders. "Grandma," he shouted. "Mrs. Perry said my drawing was the best in the class." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, forcing warmth into my voice as I hugged him. His small arms wrapped around me, and for a moment I wished I could crawl into that simple comfort and stay there. He sat at the kitchen table and flipped open his homework folder, chattering about dinosaurs again. Then he paused, frowning, and pulled out 2 pages. "Grandma," he said slowly, "look." I leaned closer. The pages were practice sentences, simple words written in careful lines. One page was neat and evenly spaced. The other looked shakier, letters slanting oddly, as if written by someone who wasn't used to holding a pencil. "My mom helped me yesterday," Noah said. "Her writing is always pretty. But today she helped me and it looked weird." I stared at the letters, a chill crawling along my skin. "Maybe she was tired," I said, too quickly. Noah shook his head, serious in the way only children can be when they sense something adults refuse to admit. "And she hugged me different," he added. "Yesterday she hugged me tight like she missed me. Today she barely hugged me at all." I felt my stomach drop. Children notice everything. They just don't always have the words for it. I wanted to ask him 100 questions. What time? What did she wear? Did she smell different? Did her voice sound the same? But the idea of pulling Noah into my fear made me sick. He was 7. He deserved a world where moms were moms and people didn't split into impossible doubles. That evening, my neighbor Mrs. Avery returned a casserole dish Elena had borrowed. She stood on the porch, smiling, but her eyes held a flicker of curiosity. "Marilyn," she said, "your daughter-in-law is always so sweet. But yesterday she handed me this with her left hand. I thought you told me she was right-handed." I forced a smile. "Maybe she uses both. Some people do." Mrs. Avery shrugged, but I saw the doubt linger. After she left, I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it. My heart hammered with the slow realization that Ethan's call wasn't the start of the strange. It was simply the moment the strange finally demanded to be seen. Because there had been small things. Tiny details I'd brushed off as mood swings, stress, nothing worth making a fuss about. Elena sometimes snapped at Noah over spilled milk, then the next day sang him lullabies like an angel. Sometimes she was affectionate with me, sometimes cold. I told myself it was normal. Marriage was hard. Parenting was exhausting. I didn't want to be the meddling mother-in-law who saw monsters in shadows. But now the shadows had shape. That night, Daniel came home, tired and distracted. Elena greeted him with her usual practiced smile. Noah ran to show him his drawing. Everything looked normal from the outside, like a family commercial. But I watched Elena closely. I watched her hands as she set plates on the table. I watched the way she listened to Daniel, nodding at the right places. I watched the way she smiled. Was it the same smile she always wore, or had it shifted slightly, like a mask sitting crooked? At one point she reached for the salt with her left hand. My chest tightened. I remembered Mrs. Avery's comment. I remembered Noah's handwriting pages. I tried to tell myself I was imagining patterns, that once fear takes root, it turns ordinary things into proof. But I couldn't unsee what I was seeing. After dinner, while Daniel helped Noah with math, Elena went upstairs to fold laundry. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink, and for the first time in my life I considered doing something that felt both ridiculous and necessary. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer, one I used for grocery lists and garden notes. I opened it and wrote the date at the top with a shaky hand. Then I wrote, Elena, left hand today. Cold hug. Different handwriting. The words looked strange on paper, like accusations. But once they were written, they felt like anchors. A record. Something solid in a world suddenly slippery. I sat down at the kitchen table, notebook open, and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere far away, a plane was crossing the ocean. And somewhere between that plane and my quiet kitchen, my family's life was splitting into two versions. One I recognized, and one I didn't. The next day I woke before sunrise, not because I was rested, but because my mind refused to let my body sink into sleep. The house still held that bluish pre-dawn quiet, the kind that usually soothed me. This time it felt like a warning, like the calm you notice only when you realize a storm is circling just beyond your sight. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, each rotation counting time I didn't know how to spend. When I finally got up, I moved through the kitchen on instinct. Coffee. Kettle. A slice of bread I didn't taste. I kept glancing at the landline as if it might ring again with Ethan's voice, with some new detail that would explain everything and let me laugh at my own fear. But the phone stayed silent, and the silence itself became proof that I was alone with this. Elena came downstairs later than usual, hair neatly styled, lips lightly tinted as if she had somewhere important to be beyond a simple market run. "Good morning, Mom," she said, and her tone was sweet, almost too sweet, like honey spread over something sour. "Good morning," I replied, watching her hands. She poured herself tea and held the cup in her right hand. Right hand. My mind immediately tried to relax. See, you're imagining things, she's just a person, people use different hands sometimes. But then she shifted the cup to her left to check her phone, and the old tightness returned to my chest. Noah shuffled in wearing wrinkled pajamas and rubbing his eyes. Elena kissed the top of his head. He leaned into it for a second, then pulled away, uncertain, as if he didn't know which version of his mother he was going to get. That small hesitation, that child's instinctive caution, made my stomach knot. Daniel rushed through breakfast, barely looking up from his emails. "Big meeting today," he mumbled, adjusting his tie. Elena smiled at him like the perfect wife. "You'll do great," she said, and if I hadn't been listening so hard, I would have believed the warmth was real. Once Daniel left and Noah's bus arrived, the house quieted again. Elena gathered her bag and keys, humming softly. "I'm going to the market," she said. "And I have to stop by the pharmacy. Do you need anything besides tomatoes?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I need the truth. I need you to stop moving through my life like a shadow with a familiar face. Instead I forced my mouth into a shape that resembled a smile. "Just tomatoes is fine." She nodded, kissed my cheek again, and walked out. The moment the door shut, My body moved before my mind could argue. I grabbed my shawl from the hook by the hallway closet and slipped it around my shoulders. I didn't bother with makeup or jewelry. I didn't even grab a proper purse, just my old canvas tote with my wallet tucked inside. My heart beat hard as I turned the lock and stepped onto the porch. Following someone felt wrong, especially someone who lived under my roof and called me Mom. But the feeling that something was being stolen from my family, something invisible yet vital, was stronger than my discomfort. I told myself I was not spying out of cruelty. I was looking out of love. Love was supposed to protect. Love was supposed to notice when something was off. I kept my distance as Elena walked down the sidewalk with confident strides. She didn't glance back once. She moved like a person certain no one was watching. At the end of the block, she didn't turn toward the market like she always did. Instead, she crossed the street and headed in the opposite direction, toward the older part of the neighborhood where the houses sat closer together and the sidewalks cracked like tired skin. My breath caught. Elena never went that way unless Daniel drove. I slowed, pretending to examine a rosebush in someone's yard, then continued when she gained too much distance. A car passed, and for a moment I feared the driver might recognize me and call out, but the car kept going. Elena turned left into a narrow side street lined with garages and chain-link fences. I hesitated at the corner, my fingers tightening around my shawl. This was no longer a simple, "she's taking longer at the market." This was a path she didn't take when she was being the Elena I knew. I stepped forward, careful. My shoes made soft tapping sounds on the pavement, loud to my anxious ears. A man on a bicycle rolled past me, eyes forward, uninterested. The morning smelled faintly of exhaust and warm bread from a bakery farther down. Elena moved quickly, weaving between buildings, and finally turned into an alley that ran behind a line of old duplexes. The alley was shaded and littered with small debris, fallen leaves, a crumpled fast food wrapper, a broken plastic crate. I stopped short, heart pounding. I was a 65-year-old widow in an alley. My common sense screamed at me to go home. But then I saw Elena pause at a weathered door on the side of a small, worn house. She knocked, 3 soft taps, and slipped inside without waiting. I stood frozen at the mouth of the alley, my brain racing. That door didn't look like a friend's house. It looked like a place people hid things. It looked like the kind of place you'd pass by without making eye contact. I waited, listening, but the alley was too quiet for me to hear anything beyond my own pulse. Minutes passed, stretching long enough to make my legs ache. I considered turning back. I considered marching up to the door and demanding answers. I considered a dozen different ways this could go wrong and hurt my family. In the end, fear won, but curiosity followed close behind. I walked back the way I came, taking a longer route home so I wouldn't appear suspicious if Elena returned quickly. The sun rose higher, warming my shoulders through the shawl. My mouth felt dry. I kept tasting metal, like nerves. When I reached my driveway and pushed open the gate, I expected to find an empty kitchen and the lingering smell of breakfast. Instead, Elena was there. She stood at the counter chopping vegetables as if she had never left. She wore her familiar cream-colored blouse, the one she always wore when she wanted to look casual but polished. Her hair was completely dry, styled exactly the way it had been earlier. And her eyes were sharp and cold. "Where did you go, Mom?" she asked. My knees nearly gave out. My mind scrambled for an explanation fast enough to keep me from collapsing right there on the kitchen tile. I went for a walk," I stammered. "Just around the block. I needed some air." Elena's knife paused for half a second, hovering above the cutting board. Then it resumed, steady and precise. "A walk," she repeated, and the way she said it made it sound like a lie even though it was the closest thing to truth I could offer. "Yes," I said quickly, and tried to smile. "Just a walk." She looked at me for a long moment, and the room felt smaller with each second. Then she nodded once, as if accepting my answer, and returned her attention to the vegetables. "All right," she said. "Lunch will be ready later." I walked past her like a ghost, up the stairs to my room, and closed the door quietly behind me. Only when I was alone did I realize my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my notebook. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to think logically. Elena had left the house. I had followed her. I had seen her go into that alley house. Then I had come home and found her in my kitchen, as if she had beaten me back by some impossible shortcut. Unless the person in the kitchen wasn't the same person I followed. My fingers trembled as I flipped open the notebook and wrote with a stiff hand. Left at 9:15. Followed to alley house. Returned home 9:40. Elena in kitchen already. Different clothes, different look. The words looked insane. Like something from a conspiracy story you'd hear on late-night radio. Yet they sat on the paper calmly, like facts. I held the pen and stared at the wall until my eyes stung. When Noah came home that afternoon, I forced myself to act normal. I made him a snack and listened as he described his day. He talked about a classmate who stole his eraser and about how the teacher promised extra recess on Friday. He was halfway through a story about drawing a dragon when his voice dropped. "Grandma," he said quietly, "Mom got mad at me this morning." I blinked. This morning? When? "Before school," he said, picking at the edge of his napkin. I spilled a little cereal and she yelled loud. She didn't even help me clean it. She just looked at me like I was bad. My chest tightened. She was probably stressed, I offered, but it sounded weak even to me. Noah's eyes filled with that childish confusion that breaks your heart because it's so pure. "Yesterday she helped me tie my shoes and said I'm her favorite person," he whispered. "Why is she different?" I reached across the table and squeezed his small hand. "Sometimes adults have hard feelings," I said. "It's not your fault." But even as I spoke, I wondered which adult he meant. Which Elena had yelled. Which Elena had hugged. That night, after dinner, Daniel went upstairs to answer a work call. Noah played quietly in the living room. Elena washed dishes at the sink. I watched her from the table, trying to be subtle, trying to find something concrete, something undeniable, that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. She finished washing a plate and reached for the towel. She dried with her left hand while holding the plate with her right, then switched without thinking, wiping with her right. People can do that, I told myself. That doesn't mean anything. Then she turned slightly, and I noticed a small mark on the inside of her wrist, a tiny mole I had never seen before. I stared at it as if it were a candle flame in darkness. Had it always been there and I just never noticed? Or was it new? Elena caught me looking and smiled. "Everything okay, Mom?" Her smile looked practiced. Her eyes didn't. "Yes," I lied again. When she went upstairs, I waited until Noah was asleep, then sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and wrote every detail I could remember. Clothes. Tone of voice. Hands. The mole. The cold look when I returned home. The way she questioned where I'd been, as if she had been the one watching me. My stomach turned as the pattern formed on paper. I wasn't just noticing mood swings. I was noticing inconsistencies that felt like two people sharing one life. The next morning, I called Ethan from the landline. My voice trembled as I asked him, "Ethan, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw." He sounded exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. "Mom, I'm not crazy," he said immediately. "I know how it sounds, but I saw her. It was her. Same face. Same voice when she spoke to the attendant. And the passport had her name." "What did she do?" I asked. "Did she notice you?" "I kept my distance," he replied. "I didn't want to cause a scene. But Mom, she was with a man. A wealthy guy. The way she leaned toward him, it wasn't casual. It was intimate. Like they'd done it 100 times." My throat tightened. "Did you hear his name?" Ethan paused. "I heard her say Charles once," he said slowly. "She laughed when she said it. Charles." The name stuck to my brain like a burr. After I hung up, I sat for a long time staring at my notebook. The house felt different now, as if I had become a guest in my own life. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a secret shifting. That afternoon Elena left again. This time she announced it calmly, as if daring me to question her. "Market," she said. "Back soon." I didn't follow her right away. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then slipped out quietly. My heart pounded as I headed toward the alley route again. But when I reached the narrow street, I saw Elena. Yes, Elena, already walking back toward the main road, carrying a small bag of groceries. Relief flashed through me, so sharp it almost hurt. Maybe yesterday had been a misunderstanding. Maybe I'd panicked and imagined the timing wrong. Then she looked up, and her eyes widened for a split second, just a flicker of surprise too quick for anyone else to notice. "Mom," she called out, voice too bright. "What are you doing out here?" I swallowed. I wanted to buy bread," I said, gesturing vaguely toward the direction of the bakery. She nodded quickly. "Oh, okay. I was just heading home." As we walked together, she held her bag in her left hand, and her steps felt slightly different than usual. Less graceful, more hurried. She talked too much, filling the air with small nonsense about prices and traffic, the way a person talks when they're trying to keep you from thinking. When we reached the house, she went inside ahead of me. I paused at the doorway, and something made me glance down at the porch mat. A small clump of dark hair lay near the edge. Not long enough to be Elena's usual length. And there was a faint smear of something on the doorknob, lipstick, but a shade deeper than the one Elena wore most days. I stood there, frozen, realizing with a sick twist of certainty that I wasn't just chasing a suspicion. I was living in a trick. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in my room and stared at the notebook until the lines blurred. My mind finally whispered the thought I had been too afraid to write. Maybe the woman in my house wasn't always Elena. And if that was true, then the next question was even worse. Why would someone take her place? I wrote one more line, the pen dragging like it weighed a pound. 2 Elenas. 1 at home, 1 on a plane. Who is who? Why? When I closed the notebook, my hands were still shaking, but my fear had changed shape. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was determination. Because if someone was wearing my family's life like a costume, I was going to find the seam where it could be torn open. And I wasn't going to wait for the truth to come to me. I was going to walk straight back into that alley and knock on the door myself. The decision settled in my chest like a stone, heavy, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the narrow alley, the worn door, and Elena's face splitting into 2 expressions, one gentle, one cold, like reflections in a cracked mirror. When dawn finally crept through my curtains, I knew I couldn't pretend any longer. Doubt had already done its damage. Only truth could stop it from spreading. I rose quietly and dressed with care, as if I were preparing for something ceremonial rather than terrifying. I chose a plain cardigan and sensible shoes, the kind that made me feel grounded. Before leaving my room, I opened the notebook one last time and slipped it into my bag. It felt like armor now. Proof that I hadn't imagined everything. The house was quiet. Elena was still asleep upstairs. Daniel had already left for work, and Noah wouldn't be up for another hour. I wrote a quick note for him. Grandma went for a walk, be back soon, and left it on the counter. Then I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, my heart hammering as if it knew I was crossing some invisible line. The walk to the alley felt longer than before. Every sound startled me, a barking dog, a car door slamming, the shout of a man calling to someone across the street. I kept my eyes forward, telling myself that fear was useless now. I had already seen too much. When I reached the narrow side street, the air felt cooler, trapped between the aging buildings. The alley entrance yawned like a mouth I didn't want to step into, but my feet moved anyway. I walked until I reached the same weathered door I had seen Elena slip through. Up close, it looked worse than I remembered. The paint peeled in long strips, exposing gray wood beneath. A single, crooked number was nailed beside the frame. 14. I hesitated, my hand hovering inches from the door. A voice in my head whispered that I was about to destroy whatever fragile peace still existed in my family. Another voice, stronger, reminded me that peace built on lies rots from the inside. I knocked. The sound echoed down the alley, louder than I expected. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard movement inside, soft footsteps, a scrape of fabric. The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared. My breath caught painfully in my throat. She looked exactly like Elena. Same eyes, same nose, same curve of the mouth. Even the small scar near the eyebrow that Elena always said came from childhood. The only difference was her expression, wide-eyed, frightened, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. "Yes?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I couldn't speak. My mind simply stalled, overloaded by confirmation. She tried to close the door, panic flickering across her face, but before she could, another voice sounded from inside. Calm, firm, female. "Isadora, wait." The door opened wider. A second woman stepped into view, taller, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She looked at me carefully, as if she had been expecting me all along. "Mrs. Hart," she said, "please come in. You deserve an explanation." The world tilted. I didn't remember giving my name, yet she knew it. My legs moved on their own, carrying me into the small, dim house. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded final. The interior smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood. The furniture was mismatched, worn, practical. In the corner of the room, an elderly man lay on a narrow bed, his chest rising and falling unevenly as he coughed weakly. The sound pierced my heart with unexpected pity. The woman who looked like Elena stood rigid near the door, wringing her hands. Up close, I could see subtle differences, a nervous twitch, a softness around the eyes that Elena rarely showed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out what?" I asked hoarsely, though I already knew the answer. The other woman gestured for me to sit. "My name is Claire," she said. "I live here with Isadora. And I think it's time we told you the truth." I sank onto a wooden chair, my bag clutched in my lap. "Who is she?" I demanded, pointing at Isadora, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. "And why does she have my daughter-in-law's face?" Isadora's eyes filled with tears. Because she is my sister," she said. "My twin." The word hit me harder than I expected. Twin. The puzzle pieces in my mind clicked into place with a sickening clarity. Claire continued gently. "Isadora and Elena were born on the same day. Their parents were very poor. They couldn't keep both babies. Isadora was given up, adopted by the man you see there and his wife. Elena stayed with the biological family." My hands trembled. "And all this time," I whispered, "Elena knew?" Isadora nodded miserably. "She found me years ago. By accident. We met at a market. When we realized how alike we were, she made me an offer." "What kind of offer?" I asked, though dread already coiled in my stomach. "To take her place sometimes," Isadora said, her voice breaking. "Just for a few hours. At first, it was small things, running errands, staying at the house while she was away. She said it was harmless. She paid me. My parents need medicine. I didn't think I had a choice." I felt my chest tighten painfully. "So when she was gone," I swallowed. "It was you." "Yes," Isadora whispered. "Not always. But sometimes." Claire stepped in. Elena used the resemblance to live another life. Travel. Meet people. She needed someone to keep things normal at home. Ethan's voice echoed in my head. "First class. France. A wealthy man." "Who is he?" I asked quietly. "The man she's seeing." Isadora looked down. "I don't know much. I heard her call him Charles. He's rich. He travels a lot. She said he could give her the life she deserved. Anger flared through me, sharp and sudden. And what about her son? Her husband? Isadora flinched. She said they were holding her back. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I looked at Isadora, this woman who had worn my family's life like borrowed clothing, and felt something unexpected alongside my fury. Pity. She was trembling. Her hands were raw, her clothes simple, her home barely held together. She wasn't a villain. She was a desperate woman caught in someone else's lie. I'm not here to hurt you, I said finally. But this cannot continue. Claire nodded. We know. That's why I told Isadora to stop. Elena doesn't listen. I stood slowly, my legs weak but my resolve firm. I need proof, I said. For my son. For my grandson. Claire reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. These are copies of Isadora's adoption papers, she said. Dates. Names. Everything matches. I glanced at them, my heart pounding. Same birth date. Same hospital. Twins. When I left the house, the sun was high and blinding. I walked home in a daze, barely aware of my surroundings. The neighborhood looked the same, lawns trimmed, cars parked, children riding bikes, but my world had shifted irreversibly. Elena was home when I returned, sitting at the table scrolling through her phone. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Did you enjoy your walk? She asked. I met her gaze steadily for the first time. Yes, I said. Very much. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe fear, but she smiled smoothly. Good. That night, I barely spoke during dinner. I watched Elena carefully, memorizing her movements, her tone, the way she spoke to Noah with practiced affection. When she kissed him goodnight, I noticed how stiff he looked in her arms. After everyone was asleep, I sat alone in the living room and called Ethan. Come home, I said simply. I need you. He didn't ask questions. I'll be there tomorrow. I hung up and stared at the dark window, my reflection faint and tired. The truth was out there now, no longer a ghost whispering in corners. It had a shape. A name. A face identical to the woman upstairs. Tomorrow, I will bring everything into the light. And nothing, would ever be the same again. The night before Ethan arrived felt longer than any I could remember. Time stretched and twisted, refusing to move at a normal pace. I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the house, the ticking clock in the hallway, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of old wood settling. Every sound felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. When morning came, I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. Elena descended the stairs dressed immaculately, her posture straight, her smile controlled. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have admired her composure. Now it unsettled me. You're up early, she said lightly. So are you, I replied, meeting her eyes. For a fraction of a second, something sharp flashed in them. Calculation, perhaps, but it vanished just as quickly. I couldn't sleep, she said. Too much on my mind. I nodded. Yes. I imagine there is. She studied me, and I could feel the unspoken tension pulling tight between us like a wire ready to snap. But neither of us said more. Noah came in moments later, sleepy and cheerful, and the performance resumed. Elena poured him juice. I buttered toast. We played our parts as if the stage hadn't already started to crumble beneath our feet. Daniel left for work unaware of the storm waiting for him at home. I almost envied him for that ignorance. Almost. By mid-afternoon, I began preparing dinner. Not because I felt like cooking, but because I needed everyone present, seated, unable to escape. I chose familiar dishes, Daniel's favorite stew, mashed potatoes the way Noah liked them, warm bread. Ordinary food for an extraordinary reckoning. My hands shook as I chopped vegetables, the knife tapping rhythmically against the cutting board. Each sound reminded me that this was real. That tonight, I would tear away the illusion Elena had so carefully built. The doorbell rang just after 6. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door to find Ethan standing there, travel-worn but alert. His eyes softened when he saw me, then sharpened with concern. "Mom," he said quietly. "What's going on?" "Come in," I replied. "You'll see." He stepped inside, setting his bag down. Elena emerged from the dining room, her expression tightening ever so slightly when she saw him. "Ethan," she said brightly. "I didn't know you were coming." He didn't smile back. "Surprise," he said flatly. Dinner began in strained politeness. Noah chatted happily, unaware of the tension crackling around him. Daniel talked about work, though he kept glancing between Ethan and Elena, sensing something off. Elena ate carefully, her fork moving slowly, as if she were measuring each bite. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart, "there's something we need to talk about." Elena stiffened. "Mom, can this wait?" she asked, a hint of irritation slipping through. "No," I said. "It can't." Ethan straightened in his chair. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Ethan, tell your brother what you told me." Ethan's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket and placed a folded document on the table. "This," he said, "is Elena's passport. I found it at the airport. On my flight to France." Daniel stared at the document, confusion etched across his face. "What are you talking about? Elena hasn't been out of the country." Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're all ganging up on me with some insane story." Ethan met her gaze unflinchingly. "I saw you," he said, "on the plane, sitting next to a man you clearly know very well." The room went silent. Noah looked from face to face, his smile fading. "Dad," he whispered. Daniel's face drained of color. "Elena," he said slowly, "tell me this isn't true." She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "This is absurd. You believe him over me." I reached for my notebook and slid it across the table. "Read," I said. Daniel hesitated, then opened it. His brow furrowed as he scanned the pages. Dates, descriptions, observations. He looked up at me, eyes searching. "Mom, what is this?" "It's the truth," I said. Or as close as I could get to it without destroying us all. Elena's composure cracked. "You've been spying on me," she shouted. "Following me?" "I followed the lies," I replied calmly. "And they led me somewhere you never expected me to go." I turned toward the door and raised my voice. "Isadora." The room froze. A moment later, the door opened, and Isadora stepped inside. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale with nerves. Noah gasped. "Why does she look like Mom?" Daniel stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. "What the hell is going on?" Elena stared at Isadora, fury blazing across her face. "You idiot," she hissed. "You promised." "I promised to stop lying," Isadora said softly. "I'm sorry." I took a step forward. "They're twins," I said. "Sisters. Separated at birth. Elena has been using Isadora to replace her whenever she wanted to disappear." Daniel's hands shook as he ran them through his hair. This can't be real." Ethan placed the passport beside the notebook. "It is." Noah began to cry. "I don't understand," he sobbed. "Which one is my mom?" The sound of his crying shattered something inside me. Elena turned toward him, her expression hard. "Stop crying," she snapped. "This isn't about you." Daniel's head snapped up. "Don't you dare speak to him like that." Something in Elena broke then. She laughed again, wild and bitter. "Fine," she said. "You want the truth? Here it is." She turned to Daniel, eyes blazing. I'm tired of this life. Of pretending to be happy. Charles gives me everything you can't. Travel, luxury, freedom. I deserve more than this small, boring existence. Daniel's voice cracked. And your son? She hesitated only a second. He'll be fine. Noah's sobs grew louder. I stepped between them, pulling Noah into my arms. Enough, I said. You've done enough damage. Elena grabbed her bag from the chair. I'm done here, she said coldly. I won't be judged. She marched to the door and slammed it behind her. Silence followed, thick, suffocating silence broken only by Noah's quiet sobs. Daniel sank back into his chair, his face buried in his hands. Ethan stood rigid, fists clenched. Isadora hovered near the door, unsure where she belonged. I held Noah tightly, rocking him gently. It's okay, I whispered. Grandma's here. Later that night, after Noah finally fell asleep from exhaustion, Daniel sat across from me in the living room. His eyes were hollow. How long did you know? He asked. Not long, I said softly. Long enough. He nodded slowly. I don't even know who I was married to. Isadora stepped forward hesitantly. I never wanted to hurt anyone, she said. I just needed the money. For my parents. Daniel looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression softened. You're not the one who broke this family, he said quietly. Tears streamed down Isadora's face. That night marked the end of one life and the painful beginning of another. The house felt emptier without Elena's presence, yet strangely lighter, as if a heavy fog had finally lifted. In the days that followed, the truth settled like dust after a collapse. Daniel filed for divorce. Elena didn't fight it. She didn't ask for custody. She vanished into the life she had chosen, leaving behind only questions and scars. Isadora stayed. At first, it was awkward, painful. But she helped with Noah, patiently, gently. She listened. She cared. She stayed. And slowly, painfully, something new began to grow in the space Elena had left behind. The storm had passed. What remained was the long work of rebuilding. The house did not heal overnight. It didn't heal in weeks, either. Healing, I learned, is not a moment. It is a quiet, stubborn process that unfolds when people keep choosing kindness even when pain still lingers. After Elena left, the silence she left behind felt heavier than any argument she had ever caused. Rooms echoed differently. The air itself seemed cautious. Daniel moved through his days like a man underwater. He went to work, came home, ate little, slept less. Some nights he sat on the porch long after darkness fell, staring at nothing, his hands wrapped around a cold mug of tea he never finished. I recognized that emptiness. I had seen it in the mirror after my husband died. It is the look of someone whose future suddenly vanished without warning. Noah was the one I worried about most. At 7 years old, children don't understand betrayal, but they feel its consequences deeply. He stopped asking where his mother was after the first few days. Instead, he became quieter, clinging to routine, watching faces carefully the way frightened children do. Some nights he woke crying, calling for the good mom, the one who sang and hugged him tightly. Each time, I held him until his breathing slowed, my heart breaking all over again. Isadora stayed close, but never intrusive. She didn't try to replace Elena. She didn't demand space in our lives. She simply showed up, early in the mornings to help with breakfast, in the afternoons to pick Noah up from school when Daniel couldn't, in the evenings to sit quietly with him and listen as he talked about his day. She moved gently, as if afraid one wrong step would send her back into the shadows. At first, Daniel kept his distance. Not out of anger toward Isadora, but confusion. Her face reminded him too much of the woman who had shattered his trust. Yet her actions told a completely different story. She never raised her voice. Never snapped. Never disappeared without explanation. When she made a promise, she kept it. One afternoon, I watched from the kitchen as Noah showed Isadora his drawings. She knelt beside him, pointing out details with genuine interest. "This one looks like it's flying," she said softly. "How did you make the wings look like that?" Noah beamed. "I practiced." "That shows," she replied. "Practice makes strong things." The words were simple, but they stayed with me. Weeks passed. Paperwork was signed. The divorce became official. Elena never called. Never asked about Noah. When Daniel told me that she had signed everything without hesitation, I saw grief harden into something quieter and more resolute inside him. He stopped waiting for closure from someone who had already left. Slowly, life found a new rhythm. Isadora became part of the household, not as a replacement, but as herself. She helped me in the garden, learning the names of plants I had tended for years. She cooked simple meals, sometimes asking for advice, sometimes surprising us with dishes from her childhood. She listened to Daniel talk about his work with an attention Elena had never truly given him. And she loved Noah, not possessively, not dramatically, but steadily. One evening, Noah climbed into her lap while she read him a book. Without thinking, he rested his head against her chest. The room went very still. Isadora froze, eyes flicking toward Daniel as if asking permission to breathe. Daniel swallowed hard and nodded once. Later that night, Noah asked me quietly, "Grandma, can Isadora read to me tomorrow too?" "Yes," I said, my voice thick. "She can." Time did what time always does. It softened sharp edges. Daniel began to laugh again, tentatively at first, then more freely. Noah returned to his noisy, curious self. The house filled with sound again, not the false perfection of before, but something warmer and more honest. One evening, months later, Daniel asked me to sit with him on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. "I need to ask you something," he said. I nodded. "Go on." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Do you think it's wrong that I feel grateful?" "For what?" I asked. "For the truth," he said. "Even though it hurt. Even though it destroyed what I thought my life was." I took his hand. "Truth hurts less than lies in the long run," I said. "Lies rot quietly. Truth gives you something solid to stand on." He nodded slowly. I think Isadora saved us. In her own way." I didn't argue. The moment that changed everything came on a rainy afternoon. Daniel was working late. I was folding laundry upstairs when I heard Noah crying in the living room. I hurried down, heart racing, only to find him upset over a broken toy. Isadora was kneeling beside him, her voice calm. "It's okay to be sad," she said gently. "But we can fix this together." Noah sniffed, then looked up at her. "You don't yell," he said. Isadora froze. "I don't want to," she replied quietly. He studied her face, then said the words that made my knees weaken. "I like you better." Silence followed, not awkward, not tense, just full. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. Neither did I. Weeks later, Daniel came to me with a small velvet box in his hands. His face was pale, but determined. "I love her," he said simply. "And she loves Noah. I don't know when it happened, but it did." I looked at the box, then at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had survived betrayal and still chosen trust. Tears filled my eyes. "Then do it the right way," I said. He smiled. The proposal was quiet. No grand gestures. No dramatic speeches. Just Daniel on one knee in the living room, Noah holding Isadora's hand, and a simple question asked with honesty and hope. Isadora cried. She looked at Noah first, then at me. When she finally said yes, the house felt lighter than it had in years. Their wedding was small. Family, close friends, a backyard decorated with flowers from my garden. Noah wore a tiny suit and stood proudly beside his father. Ethan flew in, smiling wider than I had seen in a long time. I watched Isadora walk toward Daniel, her face radiant, not with performance, but with sincerity. As I sat there, I thought about how close I had come to ignoring the truth. How easy it would have been to dismiss my doubts, to choose silence over courage. And how everything would have continued to rot quietly beneath a perfect surface. Instead, I had listened. I had asked. I had followed my fear until it led me to clarity. Years have passed since then. Our home is full again, not with illusion, but with warmth. Noah calls Isadora Mom, without hesitation. Daniel laughs freely. Ethan visits whenever he can. And I sit on the porch in the evenings, listening to life unfold around me, grateful for the strength it took to face what I never wanted to see. Sometimes the truth breaks things. Sometimes it builds something far better. And I know now, without doubt, that courage is not loud. It is quiet, persistent, and willing to walk down dark alleys alone if it means protecting the people you love. That is how our story ends. And how our real life finally began.